Lisa had made a promise to herself. No more blind dates. Ever. The last 3 had been complete disasters, and she was done putting herself through that awkward torture. But her best friend from college, Rachel, wouldn't take no for an answer this time. "I know you've said this before, but trust me, this one is different," Rachel had said over the phone last Tuesday. "Just meet him once. 1 coffee. That's all I'm asking." Lisa had sighed deeply, staring at her violin case sitting in the corner of her small apartment. "Fine, 1 coffee. But that's it. And if he turns out to be weird, you're buying me dinner for a month." Rachel had laughed, but then her voice got a bit more serious. "Actually, I have one small request." "Could you bring your violin?" "What?" "Why would I bring my violin to a coffee shop?" Lisa had asked, confused. "Just trust me on this, please. I promise it'll make sense when you get there." Now, 3 days later, Lisa was walking into the cozy coffee shop on Maple Street, her violin case feeling heavier than usual in her hand. She felt ridiculous carrying it around like some kind of street performer. The warm smell of roasted coffee beans filled her nose as she pushed open the door, and soft jazz music played through the speakers. She spotted him right away. He was sitting at a corner table near the window, and Rachel had texted her what he was wearing. A navy blue sweater and jeans. His hands were folded neatly on the table, and there was a white cane leaning against his chair. Lisa stopped in her tracks. Rachel hadn't mentioned this. A wave of mixed emotions hit her all at once. Surprise, confusion, and if she was being honest, a little bit of anger that Rachel had left out such an important detail. But before she could turn around and leave, the man's face turned slightly toward the sound of the door, and he smiled. It wasn't a forced smile or a nervous one. It was genuine and warm, and it caught her completely off guard. Lisa took a breath and walked over to the table. "Hi, are you Michael?" "I am," he said, and his smile grew wider. "You must be Lisa. I heard your footsteps. And unless I'm mistaken, that's a violin case you're carrying." She looked down at the case in her hand, then back at him. His eyes didn't quite focus on her face. They seemed to look somewhere just past her shoulder, and that's when it fully registered. Michael was blind. "Yeah, it is," she said, sitting down across from him. "Rachel told me to bring it, but she didn't exactly explain why." Michael laughed softly. "That sounds like Rachel. She loves her little surprises. She told me you're a musician. She said you play beautifully, actually." "She's biased," Lisa said, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. "We've been friends since we were 18. She has to say nice things about me." "I doubt that's the only reason," Michael said. He had an easy way of speaking that put her at ease despite the awkwardness of the situation. "So what do you do? Like professionally? Or is music just a hobby?" They fell into conversation, and Lisa found herself relaxing more than she expected. Michael worked as a software engineer for a tech company downtown. He'd moved to the city about 6 months ago for the job. He was funny, making jokes about how he'd gotten lost on the subway his first week because he'd relied too much on a GPS app that kept sending him to the wrong exits. Lisa told him about her work as a session musician, playing for various recording studios and sometimes performing at weddings and events. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and she got to do what she loved. After about 20 minutes of talking, Michael shifted in his seat slightly and tilted his head. "I hope this isn't too forward, but Rachel mentioned you were bringing your violin for a reason. Would you consider playing something for me?" Lisa felt her stomach tighten. She glanced around the coffee shop. There were maybe a dozen other people scattered at different tables, most of them focused on their laptops or phones. The barista behind the counter, a friendly woman named Kelly, who Lisa had met before, gave her an encouraging nod. Rachel must have set this whole thing up in advance. "What would you want to hear?" Lisa asked quietly. Michael was silent for a moment. His fingers drummed lightly on the table like he was thinking carefully. "Do you know the violin version of Clair de Lune? The Debussy piece?" Lisa's hands went cold. She knew it. Of course she knew it. It was the piece her mom had loved most in the world. The piece Lisa had played at her mom's funeral 2 years ago. The piece she'd sworn she'd never play again because it hurt too much to even think about. I know it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry if that's a difficult request," Michael said quickly, as if sensing something had changed in her tone. "We can do something else. Anything else. That song means a lot to me." Lisa looked at him, really looked at him. There was something in his expression that she recognized. a kind of sadness that sat behind his smile, the same sadness she saw in her own mirror sometimes. She opened her violin case slowly, her hands moving automatically through the familiar routine. Remove the violin. Check the strings. Apply rosin to the bow. The other customers in the coffee shop started to notice now, their conversations dropping to whispers as they watched with curiosity. Lisa stood up, positioned the violin under her chin, and closed her eyes for just a second. She thought about her mom, about the hospital room, about the way her mom had smiled even when she was tired and in pain, about how music had been the one thing that could still make her happy in those final days. She drew the bow across the strings, and the first note sang out clear and pure. The coffee shop went completely silent except for the sound of her violin. Lisa poured everything into the music. All the grief she'd been carrying, all the memories, all the love she still had for her mom but didn't know what to do with anymore. As she played, she kept her eyes open this time, watching Michael. His whole body seemed to change. The stiffness in his shoulders melted away. His hands, which had been folded tightly on the table, relaxed and began to move slightly, like he was conducting an invisible orchestra only he could see. And then she saw them. Tears. They ran down his cheeks slowly, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Lisa played the final note, letting it fade naturally into the quiet of the coffee shop. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the other customers started to applaud, but Lisa barely heard them. She was focused on Michael, who sat there with tears still wet on his face. "My mother used to play that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She was a pianist. Before the accident that took my sight, and took her from me, I haven't heard that song in 8 years. Lisa carefully set her violin back in its case, her own eyes burning with tears. She sat back down at the table and without thinking reached across and put her hand on his. "I played it at my mom's funeral," she said softly. 2 years ago. Cancer." Michael turned his hand over and squeezed hers gently. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. They didn't need to. The music had already said everything that needed to be said. Around them, the coffee shop slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed. The espresso machine hissed. But at their small table by the window, two strangers had just shared something most people never share on a first date. They'd shared their grief, their loss, and somehow in that sharing, something new had begun. That first coffee date turned into dinner. Neither of them had planned it. But when the coffee shop started closing at 6, Michael had asked if she wanted to grab some food, and Lisa had said yes without hesitation. They walked to a small Italian restaurant 2 blocks away. Well, Lisa walked. Michael moved with his cane, tapping it lightly on the sidewalk as they went. She noticed how confident he was, how he didn't need her help but also didn't seem bothered when she mentioned there was a curb coming up, or a street sign pole ahead. Over pasta and breadsticks, Michael told her his story. He'd been 19 when it happened, a regular Tuesday afternoon, driving home from his college campus with his mother. She was taking him to get his wisdom teeth checked. Something so ordinary, so forgettable, except it became the day that changed everything. A truck ran a red light, Michael said, twirling his fork through his spaghetti with the ease of someone who'd learned to navigate the world without sight. I don't remember the impact. I just remember waking up in the hospital 3 days later. Everything was dark. The doctors were talking, and I kept asking them to turn on the lights. Lisa's throat felt tight. "And your mom?" "She didn't make it past the first day," Michael said quietly. "I didn't even get to say goodbye. By the time I woke up, she was already gone." They sat in silence for a moment. The restaurant buzzed with other conversations, the clinking of glasses, someone laughing at a nearby table. Normal life continuing all around them while they shared something that felt anything but normal. "She was a pianist," Michael continued. "A really good one. She taught piano lessons from our house, and every evening after dinner she'd practice. I grew up falling asleep to the sound of her playing Chopin and Beethoven and all the classics. Music was everything to her." "What about you?" Lisa asked. "Did you play too?" Michael nodded. "She taught me from the time I was 5. I wasn't as talented as she was, but I loved it, because it was something we shared. After the accident, though," he trailed off, setting down his fork, "I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I thought about sitting at a piano, all I could think about was her." The grief was too heavy, So I just stopped. Stopped playing, stopped listening to classical music, stopped everything that reminded me of her. Lisa understood that feeling more than she could put into words. I did the same thing, she admitted. After my mom died, I almost sold my violin. I couldn't pick it up for 6 months. Even now, I only play for work. I don't play for myself anymore. It doesn't bring me joy like it used to. But you played today, Michael said, a small smile crossing his face. And it was beautiful. Heartbreaking, but beautiful. I almost didn't, Lisa confessed. When you asked for that specific song, I nearly said no. It was my mom's favorite. I played it for her in the hospital the week before she died. Playing it today was the first time since her funeral. Michael reached across the table, his hand searching for hers. She met him halfway, and his fingers wrapped around hers with surprising warmth. Thank you, he said simply, for playing it, for sharing that with me. They talked until the restaurant staff started putting chairs up on empty tables. Michael told her about his job, about the special software that Red Coat allowed to him, about his coworkers who'd become friends. Lisa told him about the weird gigs she'd played, like the wedding where the bride insisted she play the theme from a video game as she walked down the aisle. When they finally left, Michael asked if she wanted to walk through the park nearby. It was late April and the evening air was perfect, cool but not cold. The park paths were well lit, and there were still a few people out jogging or walking their dogs. They found a bench near a small pond and sat down. Lisa could hear frogs croaking somewhere in the darkness, and the sound made her smile. Can I ask you something? Michael said after a while. Sure. Would you want to do this again? Not the whole blind date setup thing, just hanging out. Maybe you could play for me sometimes. I miss music more than I realized until today. Lisa felt something warm spread through her chest. I'd like that, but only if you promise me something. What's that? You have to tell me more about your mom's playing. What pieces she loved, what she taught you. I want to know about her. Michael's expression softened. Deal, and you have to tell me about your mom too. Over the next few weeks, they met up regularly, sometimes at coffee shops, sometimes at the park, once at a bookstore where Michael showed her how his phone could scan and read books aloud to him. Lisa was amazed by how much technology had advanced to help people who couldn't see. But mostly they met so Lisa could play for him. She'd bring her violin and they'd find quiet spots where she could perform. She played everything. Classical pieces that his mother had loved, jazz improvisations that made him laugh, even pop songs that she rearranged for violin, which he pretended to hate but she could tell he secretly enjoyed. Michael started opening up more about his mother. He told Lisa about how his mom would make him practice scales every morning before school, even when he complained. How she'd reward him with his favorite cookies when he mastered a difficult piece. How she'd had this dream that one day they'd perform a duet together at Carnegie Hall, which he knew was unrealistic, but loved that she believed in him that much. Lisa shared her own memories. Her mom had worked as a nurse, but she'd loved music even though she couldn't play an instrument herself. She'd saved up to buy Lisa her first real violin when Lisa was 12. She'd driven Lisa to every lesson, every recital, every audition, no matter how tired she was from her hospital shifts. She used to say that music was the closest thing to magic that humans ever created. Lisa said one evening as they sat on Michael's apartment building's rooftop. She said it could make you feel things that didn't even have names yet. She was right, Michael said. Music is magic. It's the only thing that stayed consistent for me. Before the accident, I could see the keys under my fingers. Now I can't. But the music sounds exactly the same. The feeling is exactly the same. Do you ever think about playing again? Lisa asked carefully. Michael was quiet for so long that Lisa thought maybe she'd overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Every single day. But I'm scared. Scared of what? Scared that I won't be good enough anymore. Scared that it won't feel the same. Scared that, I don't know, that I'll try and it'll just make me miss her more. He paused. My mom's piano is still in my apartment. It's in the second bedroom covered with a sheet. I haven't touched it since before the accident. I can't bring myself to sell it, but I can't play it either. Lisa took his hand. What if you didn't have to do it alone? What do you mean? What if we played together? You and me. Nothing fancy. Just simple songs, like the ones your mom probably taught you when you were little. Michael turned toward her, and even though his eyes couldn't see her face, she felt like he was looking right into her heart. You'd do that? You'd play with me? I would. But only if you want to. No pressure, just an offer. From one person who misses music to another. Michael smiled then. A real, genuine smile that reached all the way to his eyes. Okay, let's try. Neither of them knew it yet. But that simple agreement was going to change everything. The following Saturday, Lisa stood outside Michael's apartment building, her violin case in one hand and a bag of takeout Chinese food in the other. She'd texted him that morning asking if today was still good for their plan, half expecting him to back out, but he'd responded within minutes saying yes, and to bring food because he was too nervous to eat breakfast. Michael buzzed her up, and when she reached his floor, he was already standing in the doorway. He looked different somehow, more nervous than she'd ever seen him. His hands kept fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. You okay? Lisa asked as she walked in. Yeah. No. Maybe. Michael laughed, but it sounded shaky. I haven't been in that room in almost 8 years. I moved the piano here when I got this apartment, but I've never even opened the door since the movers set it up. Lisa set down the food and her violin case on the kitchen counter. The apartment was neat and organized in a way that made sense for someone who couldn't see. Everything seemed to have its specific place. We can eat first if you want, she offered. No rush, Michael shook his head. No, if we eat first, I'll just keep putting it off. Let's do this now before I lose my nerve completely. He led her down a short hallway to a closed door. His hand rested on the doorknob for a long moment before he finally turned it. The door opened with a soft creak. The room was dim, with only the afternoon sunlight filtering through partially closed blinds. And there, in the center of the room, was the piano. It was covered with a white sheet, like a ghost from another life. Dust had settled on the fabric, and the air in the room smelled stale and unused. Lisa walked over and gently pulled the sheet away. Underneath was a beautiful upright Yamaha piano in dark cherry wood. The keys were yellowed slightly with age, and there was a thin layer of dust on the surface, but it was clear this had once been a well-loved instrument. It's beautiful, Lisa said softly. Michael stood in the doorway, not moving. Is it in bad shape? No, just dusty, and probably out of tune, but nothing that can't be fixed. She pulled out the piano bench and sat down, pressing one of the middle keys. The note came out slightly flat, but the tone was still rich and warm. She played a few more notes, testing the range. Your mom took good care of this, Lisa said. You can tell it was played with love. Michael finally stepped into the room. He moved slowly, carefully until his hand found the edge of the piano. His fingers traced along the wood, feeling the contours like he was reading Braille. She'd play every night after dinner, he said quietly. I'd do my homework at the kitchen table and I could hear her in here. Sometimes she'd call me in to practice with her. She'd take the bench and I'd stand next to her and we'd play duets. Simple ones at first, then more complicated ones as I got better. Lisa stood up from the bench. Here, you sit. I'll stand with my violin. Michael hesitated, then slowly made his way around to the bench. He sat down like he was afraid the piano might disappear if he moved too quickly. His hands hovered over the keys, not quite touching them. I don't know if I remember how, he whispered. Your hands remember. Trust me. I'll start with something simple and you can join in whenever you're ready. No pressure. If you want to stop, we stop. Lisa positioned her violin and thought for a moment about what to play. She needed something easy, something that wouldn't require too much thinking, something that was pure muscle memory. She started playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the same song every beginning musician learns. Simple, sweet, innocent. For the first few bars, Michael just sat there, his hands frozen above the keys. Lisa kept playing, keeping the melody slow and steady. And then so quietly she almost missed it, she heard it. One note, then another. Michael's right hand had found its way to the keys, picking out the melody an octave below her violin. His left hand joined in, adding simple bass notes. The rhythm was hesitant at first, uncertain. He hit a wrong note and flinched, his hands pulling back slightly. But Lisa didn't stop playing. She just kept going, her violin carrying the melody forward, giving him space to find his way back in. And he did. His hands returned to the keys, and this time they moved with more confidence. The muscle memory was kicking in. His fingers knew where to go, even if his mind was doubting every move. They played through the simple song twice. When they finished, Michael's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs, and Lisa could see his chest rising and falling with quick breaths. You okay? she asked, setting down her violin. Michael nodded, but she could see tears gathering in his eyes. I haven't felt that feeling in so long. My hands on the keys. The vibration of the notes. It was like being a kid again. You did great. Really great. I made mistakes. So what? I make mistakes all the time. That's part of music. The mistakes are what make it human. They spent the next 2 hours playing together. Simple songs at first. Children's melodies. Basic scales. Then Michael started remembering more complex pieces. His hands would stumble through the difficult parts, but Lisa learned to follow his lead, her violin adapting to wherever he was in the music. At one point, Michael started playing something Lisa didn't recognize. It was beautiful and melancholy, with a gentle rolling melody that reminded her of rain falling on a window. "What is that?" she asked when he paused. "Something my mom wrote. She never published it or anything. It was just for us. She called it Morning Song because she wrote it early one morning when she couldn't sleep. It's beautiful. I can't believe I still remember it," Michael said, his voice full of wonder. "I thought I'd forgotten, but my hands just knew." Lisa felt her own eyes stinging with tears. There was something magical about watching Michael reconnect with this part of himself. This part he'd buried for so long because the pain of losing his mother had been too much to bear. They finally took a break to eat the Chinese food, which had gone cold, but neither of them cared. They sat on Michael's couch eating straight from the containers, and Michael couldn't stop talking about how good it felt to play again. "I forgot how much I loved it," he said between bites of orange chicken. "Not just the sound, but the feeling. The way your whole body is involved. The way you can express things that don't have words." "Are you going to keep playing?" Lisa asked. "Yeah, I think I am. I want to take lessons again. There are teachers who work with blind musicians. I looked it up a few years ago, but never followed through. But now I think I'm ready." "That's amazing, Michael. Really." He turned toward her, and his expression was so open, so grateful, that it made her heart squeeze. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. "You gave me permission to try again. To make mistakes. To remember my mom without it destroying me." Lisa reached over and took his hand. "You did that yourself." "I just played some violin." "No, you did more than that. You showed me that music doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful, that it's okay to be scared and do it anyway. That grief and joy can exist in the same space." They sat there on the couch, hands intertwined, as the evening light faded outside Michael's window. The piano sat in the next room, no longer covered, no longer a ghost. It was alive again, and so was something inside both of them that had been dormant for too long. Neither of them knew where this was going. This friendship that had started with a blind date and a violin. But they both knew that something important had shifted. They'd helped each other find their way back to music. And in doing that, they'd started finding their way back to themselves. 3 months passed, and Lisa's life had changed in ways she never expected. She found herself spending almost every evening at Michael's apartment or him at hers. They'd become inseparable, but not in the way that felt suffocating. It felt natural, like finding a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing. Michael had found a piano teacher named Mrs. Chen, a woman in her 60s who specialized in teaching visually impaired musicians. She came to his apartment twice a week, and Lisa had started sitting in on the lessons. Mrs. Chen was patient but firm, pushing Michael to challenge himself while understanding his unique needs. "Your technique is rusty, but the foundation is solid," Mrs. Chen had told him after the first lesson. "Your mother taught you well. We just need to wake up those sleeping muscles." Lisa watched Michael transform week by week. His confidence grew. The hesitation in his playing disappeared. He started practicing every day, sometimes for hours, making up for the 8 years he'd lost. The apartment that had once been silent except for the hum of his computer now rang with music at all hours. But something else was happening too, something neither of them had planned for or even talked about directly. They were falling for each other. It started small. The way Michael's face would light up when he heard Lisa's footsteps at his door. The way Lisa found herself thinking about him during her recording sessions, wondering what he was doing. The way their hands would find each other naturally now without thinking. The way conversations that started at dinner would stretch past midnight, neither of them wanting to say goodnight. One evening in late July, they were practicing together as usual. Michael was working on a Chopin nocturne that Mrs. Chen had assigned him. It was challenging, full of delicate runs and emotional depth. Lisa sat in the corner, listening, her violin resting on her lap. Michael played through it once, making several mistakes, but pushing through to the end. When he finished, he sat back with a frustrated sigh. I can't get the middle section right. The timing feels off. Play it again, Lisa said, but slower this time. Don't worry about the tempo. Just feel the emotion of it. Michael nodded and started again. This time, Lisa stood up and moved closer, positioning herself next to the piano. As Michael played, she began to play along with her violin, adding a harmony she created on the spot. The two instruments wove together, her violin supporting his piano, filling in the spaces where he hesitated. Something magical happened. The piece came alive in a way it hadn't before. Michael's playing became more fluid, more confident. He leaned into the emotion of the music, and Lisa matched him note for note. When they reached the final chord, they let it ring out together, fading slowly into silence. Michael's hands stayed on the keys, and he was smiling. That was incredible. How did you know exactly what to play? I was listening to you, following where you were going. We should do more of that. Not just you supporting my practice, but actually creating something together, like a real partnership. Lisa felt her heart skip. I'd love that. They started spending time creating their own arrangements, taking classical pieces and reimagining them for piano and violin. Sometimes Michael would come up with a melody, and Lisa would build harmonies around it. Other times Lisa would play something, and Michael would add piano underneath, creating layers of sound that neither could have made alone. Their friend Rachel noticed the change immediately. She invited Lisa out for lunch one Saturday, and the first thing she said after they sat down was, "So, are you two dating or what?" Lisa nearly choked on her water. What? No, we're just friends. Rachel gave her a look that said she wasn't buying it. Lisa, come on. I've known you for almost 10 years. I've never seen you like this about anyone. Like what? Happy. Actually, genuinely happy. You smile when you talk about him. You check your phone constantly to see if he's texted. Last week you canceled a paying gig to help him practice for his lesson. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but realized Rachel was right. I don't know what we are. We haven't talked about it. I don't want to mess things up. What we have right now is so good. What if I say something and it ruins everything? Or what if you say something and it becomes even better? Rachel said gently. Lisa, I set you two up because I thought you'd be good for each other. But I had no idea it would be this good. Don't let fear stop you from going after something real. That conversation stayed with Lisa for days. She found herself watching Michael differently, noticing the way his hair fell across his forehead when he was concentrating on a difficult passage, the way he laughed at her terrible jokes, the way he'd reach for her hand without thinking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. One evening, they were sitting on Michael's small balcony after a long practice session. The late summer air was warm, and they could hear the sounds of the city below. Cars honking, people talking, life happening all around them. Can I ask you something? Michael said suddenly. Sure. What do you think about when you play now? Is it still painful? Thinking about your mom? Lisa considered the question. It's different now. It still makes me think of her, but it doesn't hurt the same way. Now when I play, I feel like I'm honoring her memory instead of running from it. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I feel the same way. Playing used to feel like opening a wound. Now it feels like, I don't know, like having a conversation with her. Like she's still here in some way. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Michael spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Lisa, I need to tell you something. And if it's going to change things between us, I'd rather know now than keep pretending. Lisa's heart started racing. Okay, I'm falling for you. Actually, I think I already have fallen for you. Completely. And I know we started as friends and music brought us together, but somewhere along the way, it became more than that for me. You're the first person I think about when I wake up. You're the last person I think about before I sleep. And I know I can't see you, but I don't need to. I know you in ways that have nothing to do with sight. Lisa felt tears welling up in her eyes. Michael, you don't have to say anything if you don't feel the same way. We can keep being friends. I just couldn't keep it inside anymore. Stop talking for a second, Lisa said, laughing through her tears. She reached over and took both of his hands. I feel the same way. I have for weeks now. I was just too scared to say anything. Michael's whole face transformed with relief and joy. Really? Really? You've become the most important person in my life. You helped me find music again. You helped me find myself again. And somewhere in all of that, you became so much more than a friend. Michael pulled her closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Can I kiss you? I thought you'd never ask. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, full of all the emotion they'd been holding back for months. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like idiots. So what now? Michael asked. Now we keep doing what we've been doing. Playing music. Supporting each other. Being together. Except now we get to call it what it actually is. And what's that? Love, Lisa said simply. This is love. Michael grinned and pulled her close again. In the apartment behind them, the piano sat waiting. And in the weeks and months to come, they would play it together countless times. But right now, in this moment, the only music that mattered was the sound of two hearts finally admitting what they'd known all along. They belonged together. 4 months after that first kiss on the balcony, Lisa woke up with an idea that wouldn't leave her alone. She was lying in bed, watching the early morning light filter through her curtains when it hit her so clearly that she sat straight up. A concert. They should do a concert together. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, actually. Watching Michael practice, seeing how far he'd come, hearing the beautiful music they created together. It seemed like such a waste to keep it just between them, but every time she'd almost mentioned it, she'd chickened out. What if Michael wasn't ready? What if the pressure was too much? But that morning something felt different, like the universe was telling her it was time. She waited until they were having breakfast together at Michael's apartment. He was scrambling eggs while she made toast, and they moved around each other in the kitchen like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. I want to ask you something, Lisa said, buttering her toast, and you can totally say no. I won't be mad or upset or anything. Michael turned off the stove and brought the pan to the table. That's a scary way to start a conversation. What if we did a concert? Like a real one. Just a small one at a community center or something. You and me performing together. Michael was quiet for a moment, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. A concert? In front of people? Yeah, I know it's a big ask. But Michael, you're so good now. And when we play together, it's special. I think other people should get to hear it. I don't know, Lisa, that's a lot of people watching. Judging. They wouldn't be judging. They'd be listening. And here's the thing. I was thinking we could make it a benefit concert. For organizations that support blind musicians and for cancer research. We could honor both our moms. Turn all this pain and healing into something that helps other people. Michael set down his fork and was quiet for a long moment. Lisa could see him thinking, the wheels turning in his head. She'd learned to read his expression so well over the past months. The little crease between his eyebrows meant he was worried. The slight tilt of his head meant he was considering something seriously. When would this be? He asked finally. Not right away. We'd have a few months to prepare. I was thinking maybe December. That gives us time to practice, pick the right pieces, find a venue. What would we play? Lisa smiled. She'd been thinking about this part a lot. A mix of things. Some classical pieces that meant something to our moms. Some of the arrangements we've created together. And I thought we could end with that piece your mom wrote. Morning song. If you're comfortable with that. Michael's eyes got a little misty. You want to play my mom's piece? In front of people? It's beautiful, Michael. And it tells a story. Your story, our story. About loss and healing and finding joy again. Michael reached across the table and found her hand. Okay, let's do it. I'm terrified, but let's do it. The next few months were a whirlwind. Lisa found a small community center that was perfect. It had a decent piano, good acoustics, and seated about 100 people. Not too big, not too small. They set a date for mid-December, about 3 weeks before Christmas. They created flyers and posted them around the neighborhood. Lisa reached out to local organizations that supported blind musicians and cancer research. All the ticket sales would go to these charities. They weren't trying to make money. They just wanted to do something meaningful. Mrs. Chen helped them choose pieces and refine their arrangements. Rachel helped with all the practical stuff like printing programs and setting up chairs. Michael's co-workers bought tickets and spread the word. Lisa's musician friends promised to come and show support. But as the date got closer, Michael's nervousness grew. A week before the concert, he made more mistakes during practice than he had in months. His hands would shake and he'd have to stop in the middle of pieces he knew perfectly. "I can't do this," he said one night, his head in his hands. "What was I thinking? I'm going to freeze up there. I'm going to forget everything." Lisa sat down next to him on the piano bench and put her arm around his shoulders. "You're not going to freeze. And even if you make mistakes, so what? The people coming to this concert aren't expecting perfection. They're coming to hear something real, something from the heart. But what if I let you down? Michael, look at me." She waited until he turned toward her. "You could never let me down. Ever. You've already given me so much. You helped me fall in love with music again. You helped me learn how to remember my mom without falling apart. You showed me what it means to be brave enough to try something even when you're scared. That's what this concert is really about. Not perfection, bravery." The night of the concert arrived faster than either of them expected. Lisa stood backstage in the small dressing room, her violin in her hands, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone in the building could probably hear it. She could hear people filing into the auditorium, the murmur of voices, the scraping of chairs. Michael sat on a folding chair, his cane resting beside him, his hands clasped tightly together. He was wearing a dark suit that made him look impossibly handsome, and his hair was neatly combed for once. "How many people are out there?" he asked. Lisa peeked through the curtain. The room was almost full. She recognized Rachel in the third row, Mrs. Chen near the back, some of Michael's co-workers scattered throughout, but there were also a lot of faces she didn't know. People who'd seen the flyers and decided to come. People who'd heard about two musicians trying to honor their mother's memories. "A lot," Lisa said, "but it's a good crowd. I can tell." A volunteer knocked on the door. 5 minutes. Michael stood up and Lisa could see his hands trembling slightly. She walked over and took both of his hands in hers. "Hey, remember why we're doing this. Not for them, for us. For our moms. For everyone who's ever lost someone and thought they'd never find joy again. We're proof that you can. That music can heal. That love can grow even in the darkest places." Michael pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know." "I love you too." They walked onto the stage together. The applause started immediately, warm and welcoming. Lisa helped Michael to the piano bench, then took her position standing beside him. She looked out at the audience, at all these people who'd come to hear them play. She raised her violin to her chin. Michael's hands found the piano keys, and without any announcement or introduction, they began to play. The first piece was Claire de Lune, the song that had started everything. The song that had made them both cry on that first coffee shop date. But now it didn't feel sad. It felt like a celebration. Like a bridge between the past and the future. They moved through their program seamlessly. Michael didn't freeze. He didn't forget. He played with more emotion and skill than Lisa had ever heard from him. And she matched him note for note, their instruments having a conversation that everyone in the room could feel. For their final piece, they played Morning Song, Michael's mother's composition. As the gentle melody filled the room, Lisa saw people in the audience reaching for tissues. She saw smiles and tears. She saw people holding hands. She saw Mrs. Chen with her eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music. The piece built to its quiet climax, then slowly faded away. Michael played the final chord, and they let it ring out, sustaining it until the sound disappeared completely into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the applause erupted. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Some were crying openly. Lisa set down her violin and looked at Michael, who had tears streaming down his face but was smiling wider than she'd ever seen. They took their bow together, and as they did, Lisa whispered to him, "We did it. Your mom would be so proud. My mom would be so proud." After the concert, people lined up to thank them, to share their own stories of loss and healing, to tell them how the music had touched them. An older woman told them she'd lost her husband last year and hadn't listened to music since because it hurt too much. But tonight reminded her why she'd loved it in the first place. When everyone had left and they were packing up, Michael pulled Lisa close. "Remember that blind date? When Rachel set us up and you thought it was going to be a disaster?" Lisa laughed. "I remember. I almost didn't go. I'm really glad you did. I'm glad you brought your violin. I'm glad you played for me even though it hurt. I'm glad you helped me find my way back to the piano. I'm glad for all of it." "Me too." They stood there in the empty auditorium holding each other, two people who'd been broken by loss but had found wholeness in each other. The piano sat silent on the stage now, but they both knew they'd be back at it tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that, because this was just the beginning. They had so much more music to make together, so many more stories to tell, so many more hearts to unlock. And it had all started with a simple song on a blind date, and the courage to play it even when it hurt. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the deepest pain, and sometimes love shows up exactly when you need it most, in the form of a melody you thought you'd never hear again.